on 882 6PR, the morning program with Paul Murray.
Labor leader Mark McGowan joins me in the studio. Last chance we'll get for this format anyway to talk to Mark leading up to the March 9 state election. He'll be with us till 9:30, so it's your chance to speak to Mark about any of those issues that you want more information on. 9211 882 is the number. Good morning.
Good morning, Paul.
How's the campaign going?
Terrific. Been doing lots of things around the place, around the regions, around the city. It's been good, making lots of announcements, Metronet, dangerous country roads, making sure we get the priorities right.
Okay, I want to raise Metronet with you because it's pretty much the centrepiece, I think, of your election campaign.
For the city. There's a lot we're doing for the country as well.
Yeah, sure. But we go to a city audience, so that's who we're talking to at the moment. I've just been looking at this issue of the rail line because there's been a lot of argy-bargy about it this week. You don't like the Liberals' advertisements on it, and you've made that very clear. We've even got nasty letters from Simon Mead, the Labor Secretary here at 6PR about those ads. I just talked to Jeffrey Thomas, the aviation editor at the West Australian. It seems that you're both saying you're going to build a link. Labor and Liberals both say you'll build a link to the airport by 2018. Your link goes to the existing international terminal, and it appears that's on the basis that the domestic terminal will be integrated in that by 2018. Now, what we've just been told by the aviation editor at the West, who's had briefings from West Australian airports, is that that's not likely to happen until 2022, which would mean that for 4 years, at least 4 years, you miss the existing domestic terminal.
Well, I'll explain the position and then I'll say where I think there was a few inaccuracies, if you like. Firstly, we're going to build it. The Liberal Party won't. I think that Mr Barnett needs to actually explain how he's dependent on federal funding and whether or not he has any commitments towards federal funding towards his. Secondly, last year Mr Barnett was saying it wasn't needed till 2031. Now he's saying they'll build it by 2018. Thirdly, we all know about the Ellenbrook promise from the Liberal Party. So that's the situation in relation to them. Our plan is to build a rail line to the airport, provide a station at Belmont Redcliffe, which will serve the existing domestic terminal, which is due to close according to the advice from the airport in 2020, but also service the community of Belmont and Redcliffe. Then to build a station in the new domestic terminal, which is going to be built, or the integrated terminal, international domestic terminal, which is going to be built by the airport, and the advice they've given us is that will be in 2020. So we're going to actually make sure that the new railway station is integrated into the new integrated terminal. So that's a long-term plan for 100 years. When people are catching the train out there, when we're long gone, you want to have the railway station in the new integrated terminal.
Even if you're right on those timings and the domestic terminal does close by 2020 and move over to the integrated one at the international terminal, you're saying that you'll build that Airport West Redcliffe station by 2018. Now, that does appear to be a long way. That it's on Tonkin Highway. That's a long way from the domestic terminal. So even on your timing, for 2 years, you've got to get passengers who want to go to the airport by train from the Airport West station to the domestic terminal. How does that happen?
Well, naturally, for the existing domestic terminal, you'd have connections like happen in other places. But I'll just explain one thing, and again...
Well, no, what's that? A bus?
Well, for a year or two, for the existing domestic terminal, which is going to close, you would have a connection via a bus. But just to explain one thing to you, the Liberal Party's plan in relation to the existing domestic terminal builds a railway station 450 metres away. So their plan builds a railway station 450 metres away from the existing domestic terminal. So neither of us would be building a railway station in the existing domestic terminal. And to be fair, it makes a bit of sense, our plan in particular, to link a new station in Belmont to the community of Belmont and have it in proximity to the domestic terminal, because if you were to build a railway station in a domestic terminal which is going to close, I think most people would say that's a bit nuts. That's a bit nuts.
Well, that's a bit disingenuous, because you know that the plan is that once the domestic terminal moves from there, they are then building a business and industrial park there, and they're saying that railway station will then service the business and industrial park.
Yeah, well, railway stations normally service residential areas. That's what they're there for, so people who live in an area can access a railway station. If you have a look at railway stations around Perth, they service residential areas where people live, and increasingly in Belmont and Redcliffe there is high density living going on, so we want to actually encourage that. But having it in proximity to an industrial park and in proximity to a residential area, that makes sense to me.
But for at least 2 years, and you've conceded this, and maybe up to 4 years, the Liberal Party ads do appear to be right, that it's about 1.5 kilometres from your Airport West station in 2018 to the domestic terminal, and you're going to expect people to catch a bus over.
Well, theirs is 450 metres away, so I don't know if that's the issue that they're raising. I don't know what they're talking about, because theirs is 450 metres away, ours is a little bit further, but ours actually services...
At this stage we're talking about your plan. We're talking about the MetroNet plan, and it does appear you've got a 2 to 4 year problem here with getting to the existing domestic terminal.
Well, that's not actually what their ads are about, but in any event, I'm happy to answer that question. The new railway station will service Belmont and Redcliffe. It's in proximity to the existing terminal, and it's planning for the future. So I think most West Australians would understand that if you build a railway station under a domestic terminal that's going to be knocked over within a year or two of it being built, people would say that's not a valid use of taxpayers' money, and I agree with them on that.
You put your costings in on MetroNet to the Treasury yesterday?
We did.
Yeah. Does it include the Yanchep and Byford extensions on MetroNet?
It does. It does.
Okay, because yesterday Troy Buswell was asserting that it didn't.
Well, this is another case of the Liberal Party's lies. They're putting out so many lies, it's embarrassing. We have included in our policy documents, and I waved them around at a press conference yesterday, the fact that we'll be building, as part of MetroNet, a railway to Yanchep and an extension to Byford. Completely clear in all of our policy documents. We've had extensive discussions with the Under-Treasurer. He understands that. He has confirmed that that will be part of the costings process. We have been completely clear and above board on that. Mr Buswell is calling us to put MetroNet in for costing, and then when we do, he says, you shouldn't put it in. They'll say and do anything.
Well, he's saying that you haven't publicly released the costings of that Yanchep and Byford extensions. Are these announcements to come?
Well, they are, but in any event, we have submitted the totality of them to Treasury for costing, so it's part of the $3.8 billion package. And I'll tell you the other thing. We're prepared to put our policies in for costing, our MetroNet plan in for costing to Treasury. Mr Barnett and Mr Buswell promised they'd put their rail plans into Treasury for costing, and they're not going to do it.
Well, you know, if they don't get them in on time, you know they're going to cop a thrashing next week.
Well, they should do. They should do. They told the States Press, the States Press passed that on to me fairly forcefully, that they were putting theirs in for costing, and they're not. So there's only one side with any credibility here when it comes to rail, and that's Labor, because we know how to build rail. We build all the rail that's there now, and we're actually putting our policy into Treasury for costing. As
I understand it, they've undertaken that they'll put in their transport plans to Treasury by early next week, they're saying. What we know is Treasury has undertaken to turn around costings within 3 days. So on the timeline, they've either got a problem on Thursday or Friday, or else they haven't.
Well, they won't put it in for costing. They'll just put it in and they'll put a figure alongside of it, and us Treasury does that figure add up. We're actually putting our plan in for Treasury to formally cost what the cost of it is. So it's a big difference. I've had difficulty getting that explanation out, but that is the difference between us and the Liberal Party. We're putting MetroNet in for formal costing by Treasury, where they will determine whether or not our costs are accurate. The Liberal Party are not doing the same.
Will Treasury also cost, on power prices, one of your policies I think that people have forgotten about is in terms of the country equalisation payments, called the TEC. Will that also go into Treasury to be costing? Because you're making claims there on savings.
We're putting all of our policies into Treasury next week,
so the new
as is traditional.
The scrapping of the museum?
All of those things.
Because that money's meant to go to MetroNet?
It's deferral, but we'll be putting all of those things into Treasury next week, as is traditional. But we put MetroNet, the big public transport plan for Perth that makes Perth livable for the future, into Treasury yesterday for formal costing, which I think is unprecedented for an opposition to do that. OK,
let's put MetroNet and costings behind us, because that argy-bargy has taken up so much time during this election campaign.
Well, it does annoy me. The lies told by the Premier, Mr Buzz, or the Liberal Party on this, the radio ads, everything that's gone on here is just an effort by them to try and sink a policy that they know West Australians want and need.
Yeah, but you've got a problem with that railway station at the domestic airport, Mark. You've got a problem for 2 to 4 years there at least.
Well, for the next 100 years, would you prefer us to have a railway station sitting under a domestic terminal that is knocked over? I mean, that's the question.
Yeah.
Obviously, I think West Australians would see the sense in what I'm saying.
Let's move on, because I want to raise a couple of issues before we get to the callers. Prison officers say our jails are overcrowded here in Western Australia, and we know that that's the truth. When do you plan to build a new jail?
We haven't released our policies in relation to that, so I'd have to have a look at our policies in regards to that, but we haven't released anything.
But it's in no one's interest to have overcrowded jails, is it?
It's not, and we have seen significant overcrowding. We have seen some, we commenced the process for building a new jail in Derby, for instance, but we haven't actually released any policies in relation to that at
Will
this
you
stage.
do so before the election?
There's still another 10 days to go. We'll be releasing more policies on a range of things, I might add, but I'll leave it at that at this stage.
But as a matter of principle, are you in favour of building more jails or sending less people to prison?
Well, I think you need to send people to prison who deserve to go to prison. And so we've actually released a range of policies to toughen up, actually, in a whole range of areas. But people who deserve to go to prison should go to prison, and if they commit the crime, they should do the time. So I think I think there's a course which is reasonable and sensible, and that's the one I've adopted.
Where's Perth's future water going to come from?
Well, fortunately, we built 2 desalination plants that have beefed up our water supply. A large part of our water supply also comes from underground, and of course our dams, but our dams have not received the rainfall that they did historically.
But we're pushing the underground aquifer way too far, aren't we?
We have. The Gnangara aquifer has been pushed hugely. I think we need to be wiser in our use of water. That's the first thing. And also, desalination has to be a large part of the future because it's an endless supply of water. If we offset it with renewable power, those sorts of things are sensible ways of dealing with our water issues.
So you're not prepared to pipe water into Perth either from the south, from the Yarragadee, or from the north?
Well, that's not part of our plans. There's a huge movement in the southwest of the state against that. I understand that, and the idea of piping it from the Kimberley is too expensive. So we're going with methods which provide for affordable water for people, but also we need to look at our use. People need to be far more careful about their use, as does industry. Okay, 9211 882. Your calls to Mark McGowan when we come back. It's 9:18. The 6PR morning program for Blackburn.